to start the tape is do a little introduction just to let the viewers know who everybody is. We're interviewing Mr. Carlton Covell at Latham headquarters. It's August 13, 2001. Interviewer is Michael Akey, and the videographer is Wayne Clark. Mr. Covell, where were you born?
Camden, New York.
Wow.
That's Oneida County.
Oneida County.
Yeah.
Okay.
Queen Village of Oneida County.
Uh-huh. And did you grow up in Camden?
I left Camden when we were about 10.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Rome, New York.
Okay.
My father run an auto top shop.
Okay.
And we went, my father was an upholsterer, but he became an auto top maker.
Oh.
So he run a top shop in Rome, New York for a number of years.
That wasn't very easy to do, making tops at that period.
No, my father was he was I refer to him as a master upholsterer. He made leather sample furniture pieces for the Hardin Furniture Company. They're still in existence. But it was his job to do the leather work.
Okay.
And then he must have got interested in auto tops. And he just went to Rome, went in business for himself.
Now, did you apprentice with him?
Yes, I did. I used to, especially in the auto top shop. I think I probably was maybe 10, 12 years old. And I used to go to the shop. It was on Front Street in Rome, New York. There's no more Front Street. But I used to go there and after I got out of school because he had the old treadle machine.
Right.
And it was my job to turn the wheel to get his treadles going so that he could sew.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
So
That stuck with me all my life.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you learned upholstery there?
I learned how to sew
Okay.
as a youngster. And even though he wouldn't let me sew, it was later on when I got into the sewing. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you went to high school in Rome?
No, my last school was McConnellsville, New York, which was close to Camden.
Okay.
There was a furniture factory there.
Okay.
And I couldn't pass the 8th grade. Arithmetic held me back. And later I had to use arithmetic all my life. But I was failed, and the teacher told me I had failed arithmetic. So that was in June. That had to have been maybe I was 15, 13. That must have been 1925.
Okay.
And I quit school, never went back. Never did go back to school.
And you went into the upholstery business at that point?
Well, at that age, at 17, I was kind of a street kid, shooting pool, and that's what we used to do. And we was living in Rome at that particular time.
Okay.
But I had all my friends, and we were the pool room crowd or gang, and we stuck together. And I always refer to myself as a street kid because that's where we spent our time, around the pool room. And we were leading up to the Depression at that point in time. And so I learned how to shoot billiards and pool very good. Can't do it anymore because I can't see. But that's what some of my, all of my good friends, I don't know of a single one that's alive today. I was the first one in the group to get married. I was 17 when I got married.
You were young.
And yes, My wife was 18. She had just turned 18. And I was lacking 2 months of being 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get my parents' signature and all that stuff. So we went through some hard times after that.
Mm-hmm. So that was going into the Depression.
Going right, leading right, no work, leading right into the Depression.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
So what, how were you able to earn a living in the Depression?
Well, I used to go with my other brother, my father, and we would take one street at a time in Rome. First it was James Street, then Washington, Madison, George, and various streets. We'd start ringing doorbells, rapping on doors, asking for odd work, and especially work on furniture,
Right.
or mowing lawn, or doing whatever they had to do, shoveling snow in the winter. And that's how we picked up what few dollars we could pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And David N. Boswell married my wife and I day before Christmas, December 24th, 1930. And we was in our 63rd year of marriage when my wife passed away.
My goodness.
Yep.
That's a long,
We had a long time. She was a real partner.
good. That's great.
Yeah.
Now,
She was also my seamstress.
oh.
So I was later in business myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, as World War II is coming about, what were you in the upholstery business then?
No, at that point in time, I was a bartender.
No.
I had worked, my mother had got me a job as a soda jerker in Troy, New York. In the meantime, they had moved to Troy.
Okay.
And the man that they rented from was Tom Gaynor. And there was a lot of ill stories about Tom Gaynor, but none of them was true. He was really a fine gent. And I stuck with him and was in contact with him all my life.
Mm-hmm.
But he gave me a job as a bartender,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked 7 nights a week, 12 hours a night, $14 a week. That started in late 1935.
Mm-hmm.
And I stuck with him up until 1939. Then I went to the World's Fair at Valentine's Inn as a bartender.
Oh.
And something happened. I can't remember exactly what happened. I think I quit that job, joined the union in New York, and went to work in various Commodore Hotel, the Essex House, and a few other places. Then I was working, I think, at the Essex House the night when I went to work. Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
Really? And that's where you heard about it?
That's where I heard about it. It was 7 o'clock at night, because I worked from 7 until 2 or 3. And I went home the next day because I knew they was building the Rome Army Air Base.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our home, where we was born and raised. So I went home that night. The next day I says to my wife, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go back to Rome. I can get a job there.
Mm-hmm.
We done exactly that. Went back to Rome. That had to have been, well, right after the war started.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work in security at the air base.
Okay.
And that was kind of a pleasant job, but I didn't like it. And then I got a transfer into leather and canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very happy there. And I worked there until I enlisted.
And when did you enlist?
I worked there at the base probably, well, I went in 1943. I went down to Utica, and my wife didn't know this. I went to, and I had 2 children at that point in time too, son and a daughter. I didn't tell my wife. When I got home, I told her because when I went into the enlistment office, they were all in there, Army, Navy, all of them. So I went to the Army because I already had an older brother in Africa. And I told the fellow, I says, I'd like to join the service. Okay, took all the information. He finally got to, are you married? And I said, yes. And he says, do you have children? And I said, yes. How old are they? Well, one was 10 and one was 11 and a half. And he said, get out of here. So I went home with my tail between my legs. There was a lot of 4Fs,
Right.
so-called. You know, that was a stigma back then. So I told my wife, and I said, I want to go in the service. Well, it took her about 2 weeks before she relinquished and says, oh, you want to go? Okay, come on. So she had to go down and sign for me. Down to Utica. So when I went in, the fellow says, what have you got against the Navy? And I said, nothing. You're in the Navy.
So that really wasn't a choice, you just decided to do it.
No, that's it.
Now, all right, you're married, you have 2 kids, why did you want to join?
Well, back, you know, that was a different society then. Back then, everybody was behind that war. I say everybody. 99% of the people was for it. I just couldn't. I already had the second brother who went in. He was in the Air Force. First one was Army. And and now I remember, when I went in the service, my older brother Stanley, had just been discharged. He was the early discharge.
Okay.
He was 1 out of 22, no, 1 out of 26 in his squad who came out of this bombing alive. So he was a sole survivor. And he received a lot of medals, and he was a real hero. But anyway, between the older brother and then the one that was a little younger than I, Donald, he went in the Air Force. And he was already on his way to England. So I couldn't stay home.
Right.
I couldn't stay home.
So now you end up, the family has one in every service branch.
2 of us were wound up in the Navy.
Oh, okay.
My younger brother was in the Navy too, but Merchant Marine. He was a gunner, Navy Merchant Marine.
Where did you go to basic?
Sampson.
You went to Sampson. Tell us about Sampson. What was Sampson like in 42?
It opened in 1942 and it closed in 45. There was a total of 225,000 people took their boots. That was a great experience. 3-month training. I still got pictures of my company. And that's where they finally gave us a test. I didn't have extra duty. I had been a Boy Scout, and I had always remembered the semaphore, A, B, C, you know, all that stuff. So my job during that 3-month period was to instruct the rest of these fellas how to do semaphore with the flags, which was good duty. I never had KP duty in boot camp. Never had to wash dishes. But at the end, they chased me around the barracks or throw me in the shower. But other than that, it was good duty. I went through all, some of us older guys, I was 30, and some of us older guys was excused from the obstacle course and running and jumping and tumbling. Well, that's what I like to do. And that I never took the excuse to get out of anything.
What was living in Sampson like?
Pretty strict. We got up, I forget the time, early in the morning, run around the grinder, came for breakfast. Everything was timed perfectly. And that was a great experience as far as I was concerned. I finally took a test, I forget what they called it, not aptitude, but what you might be geared for. And strangely enough, I got, they wanted to make a radio man out of me. I knew nothing about that stuff. And I told the instructor, I said, I don't know anything about that. Well, he says, your marks are good. Well, I would rather go to parachute school. I knew my younger brother was Army in the Air Force, parachute. So that's what stuck in my mind. So finally, and I was looking the other day at the paper that the part of the military record said that even though the quota, oh no, I had written a letter to my father, and in the letter I told him the quota was very small for parachute rigger, but I think I'm going to get it. And I did get it. And as far as I know, there was only 26 of us that went through parachute school in Corpus Christi that particular time.
Okay.
That was January. No, it was over. We made our first jump. Because that's another thing they told us up there at Sampson. Well, you know you got to jump. You know you got to make 2 test jumps. Well, back then it didn't. Yeah, so what? You know. So that's the way it was.
So you were in Sampson in the winter?
No, I was there. I went there in, I think it was June or July. I got out of there in September.
Okay.
September the 21st, 1943. Went right back to Sampson, shipped out for Corpus Christi.
Do you ever get into Geneva at all?
Yeah, never got in for Liberty. Our group in Sampson, we never got the turkey or whatever it was they was awarded to allow them to go in. I've been to Geneva many times, but not during the time that I was there as a sailor.
So after basic training, you went into rigging school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Parachute rigger. That was very interesting, very good. I already knew how to sew. I knew how to operate a sewing. Here it is right here. This we had to make in parachute school. We had to make the case, and you know, to get a 4-point, which is a perfect mark in Navy, I had to make my ripcord.
Oh,
and
good.
Had to bend and had to weld and do the wiring and the pins, everything. But
nice job.
we had to get marked with this, and my mark on this this particular case was 3.75.
Very good. Out of 4.
Yeah, they couldn't mark me 4.
Okay.
So
A nice job.
it just happens that I was very particular because I knew my early experience. I knew exactly how to set the stitches and how to sew and how to keep a straight seam. So that came in handy.
Yes.
Then we had a lot of running, tumbling, jumping, and swinging on the bars and all that stuff to get, I don't know, I guess just to loosen you all up, and it was very enjoyable.
So the rigging school lasts for about how long?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And after that?
After that, I got my choice of, because I had pretty good marks, of assignments. and I picked Jacksonville, Florida, because it was a little closer to home, I thought, than Chicago. But it appealed to me more than Chicago. So I stayed there until early 1945. I was shipped out Shoemaker and stayed there a few days. Got an assignment. They shipped me over to a Cashew outfit over in Hawaii at Oahu.
So you're rigging parachutes for Navy flyers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, or for anybody that, anybody that flew
Okay.
would have a chute back then.
Okay.
Whether it was chest or back,
Okay.
they had to have a chute.
How many shoots can you do a day safely?
Oh, well, that was interesting. That's a good question. At Jacksonville, that was a major, on the whole East Coast, that was a major repacking and repairing base. And a few years I went back there, I couldn't even find the loft, because the loft is the highest building on the base. But Navy took 2 riggers, one on each side of the table. We could pack a chute in 3 minutes, the whole thing. I went to a parachute riggers reunion a couple of years ago down in Pensacola. Now they pack a chute in almost immediately, and I don't know how they do it, but 12 years between the packing. But when I was packing, early on in Jacksonville, they were still using silk. Okay. Then they got away from that and got into nylon. But we could, 2 of us could pack chute for 3 minutes.
Now, what are some of the important things that you have to remember when you're packing a chute?
Packing a chute, first it had to be dried, aired and dried. Then it's stretched out on a table. And now here's a 24-foot canopy stretched out with all the shroud lines. And what we had to do was that's where 2 of us come in, and that's where something like this. See, there was a packer and the helper,
Okay.
but absent. You might be the helper. And we would both, I would take this and pull the chute up. And we had marks where it had to be. Pull the canopy, pull it out, get ready for the next one. But before doing that, we would have to, each would have to, because you got shroud lines to consider too. We had to pull the chute out to get air into it. And it was really, I can't describe exactly because I can't even remember how we done the lines. The lines were folded and weaved. And they had to be a certain way.
Right.
And we just got through it. And I think there was, at Jacksonville, as I remember, there was about 10 riggers. And among those 10 riggers were 3 or 4 female riggers. And they would rig right along with us. It was, no matter what you done, they done it. So there was never any question.
They were also military?
Yeah. Then they had civilian people on the sewing machines there. Although we used to sew too, but primarily it was civilians. But when we finished the chute, then the packer had to sign his name, date, fold the slip up, slip it in the pocket in the chute, so that if it was ever used, if it was malfunctioned, and they pulled the ticket out, they'd know who done it. So every once in a while, at Jacksonville, I had 3 of them that were used by pilots.
Oh, really?
They had to bail out. And I've got some of them in my book here. I kept them because I thought it was interesting. Where I made a mistake was I didn't get the pilots' names. But for some reason or other, you don't think about those things, I guess.
Now, when they used the chute, did they send you the tickets, or?
No. What would happen, and it happened to me 3 times. I've seen it happen other times in Jacksonville. Not when I was overseas, for obvious reasons. But all of a sudden, some, a new officer, a new face would come into the loft, holler out Covell or Jones or whatever. You raise your hand, he'd come over, give you a big hug. Yeah, real good hug, thank you, and a bottle of whiskey.
They were pretty appreciative, weren't they?
I'll tell you, I think parachute rigger had the best rate in the Navy. I was the only rigger on board ship. I was the only one. Nobody told me what to do. Well, I had a parachute officer, but he was a young fighter pilot and a good guy. Never bothered, never asked me a question.
Well, you knew your job, and
Yeah,
that's all that mattered.
It had to be done a certain way, and that's the way it was.
So when did you get your first ship assignment?
I got that in when I went to Shoemaker. They shipped me over to Oahu, and that was interesting. When I got to Oahu, here at the CASU unit, that was Carrier Aircraft Service Unit, here's about 12 or 14 other riggers. Only one guy that was with me from Jacksonville. So we were 2 strangers among these other 12 or 14. And they were being shipped down in seniority.
Okay.
So one day, I had been to the movies. And on my way back, here's this big stairway that led up into the loft there. And bouncing down the stairway was a first-class rigger. And he says to me, he seen that I was a rigger. He says, "Where's the chief here?" I says, "I don't know, isn't he up there?" "No," he says, "there's only a few guys up there." I said, "Well, do you need to see him? He'll be back." "No," he says, "I'm here to get a replacement for my ship. I'm getting off my ship. I need a replacement." That's all I had to hear. So I says to him, "Why don't you take me to can you take me to the personnel officer?" "Sure," he says. "You wanna go see him?" "Sure." So he brought me over to the personnel officer on the Kasaan Bay. And I was accepted. I left the loft the next day. And they was all extremely mad at me. They cursed at me and hollered at me and booed me and everything because I wasn't supposed to really have done that. But after that personnel officer signed me, that was the end of it.
Now, the ship you were assigned to was an escort carrier?
Yeah, escort carrier, USS Kasaan Bay, number 69.
Okay, what was life like aboard ship?
Pretty good. It was kind of close. My sleeping quarters was directly under the hangar deck where all the resting gear cables were. And I used to sleep up in the gun sponson because I was out. We left Oahu for anti-submarine duty. And that was that was June, mid-June or late June of 45. Well, as you know, the war was over in August. But we wound up, and I didn't know this until just recently when I bought this little book, Secrets. The Greatest Invasion That Never Happened. Davis and Weber wrote it. I didn't know that we were rendezvousing. I didn't know we was going to invade Japan on November the 1st, 45. But we was operating with one destroyer, 4 destroyer escorts, and a submarine. That was our little group, on anti-submarine duty. And then I discovered, after we left Oahu to go further out, we got everybody on board ship was communicating, the captain was communicating. Make sure that we're going into hostile waters. Make sure that your insurance is where you want it. If there's any changes to be made, report to so-and-so. So I thought to myself that, Jesus, what the hell am I doing here, really? Because it was, you never know what to expect. We never did get into actual combat, but we was on several general alarms, but they evidently never discovered that what the general, it was anti-submarine, so that's what we was there for. There may have been a submarine, I don't know, but nothing ever happened. Then I had an opportunity through the personnel officer, I forget his name, he was a nice guy. He was younger than I was too. But something was said about extra pay. And so they checked me out as a gunner. And I'd done that for extra pay. I figured, well, as long as I'm here, let me get a few extra dollars, because most of my money was going home. And there was no place to spend it, really, but I did make 4 flights, TBMs, as a gunner.
What was that like?
It was very interesting, very, very interesting. I liked that. I didn't like the thought of what might be, but just to get up there away from the ship, I guess. And but it was kind of enjoy. I flew backwards. I looked at the tail, and it was all right. It was all right. But I feel like I was very fortunate. I was fortunate when the war ended, because after reading this latest book that I was speaking about, that would have really been a catastrophe. Out of 500, I think there was 553 escort carriers built. The one I was on was out of the first class, the Casablanca class. And out of all those 553 escort carriers, there's only one in existence down at some island down in Galveston, Texas. And it's a famous ship. I think it's the Bogue. It saw a lot of action. My thought is, why did they sell them all and destroy them all? Should have made a museum out of one of them.
Yeah.
Like they've got different museum battleships and carriers. Because the escort carriers, they were small. I think we had, as I recall, we had maybe 15 or 16 TBMs and 8 or 10 fighter planes. I think they were F-4Us. That was all that we had. The flight deck was only 600 or 575 foot long. Everything had to be catapulted off.
Oh, really?
And there was only one takeoff and one landing in darkness. They were classed as extremely dangerous, Navy. And those pilots, they had to be the best in the world. They still have to be that way.
So what was it like to land on one of those things?
Unbelievable. Scared the daylights out of me, because these aviators, they would, before they would land, I don't know what they'd done. They'd, go around the circle, and you'd swear those wingtips was going to hit. Geez, I looked on that bubble. We're never going to make it. But then when you're way up there to look down and see that tiny dot, that was something else. But I've seen a few of those planes go over the side and accidents and things of that nature. But it was a little scary. But it was also, you was there and you done it.
Sure.
So.
You didn't get involved with any kamikaze attacks?
No. The closest I ever got to that, we was at a rest camp on Guam. And there was one of those captured Baka bombs there, kamikaze. And we all took turns to get into it to see what it was like. It's amazing. I could just squeeze into that seat, and directly in front of my nose was the sight. So those guys that done that job, those young Japanese, I don't know what kind of people they were. It was very brave or didn't have any brains, because they was a goner once they sat there.
Mm-hmm. So what was rest camp like at Guam?
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
It was very good. It was, I guess there was still Japanese. I understood they stayed there for quite a while. Mm-hmm. They didn't even know the war was over, some of them.
Any USO shows?
No, never went to a USO show there. Mm-hmm. I was, I don't think maybe they had some. I don't know. I know our squadron went there as a squadron. Mm-hmm. I guess we had, 120 or 130 men in the squadron.
Were you in any of the hurricanes?
Yes.
What was that like?
Oh, terrible. Terrible. I was in that one in September, June, July, August, probably late, sometime in August, when that typhoon hit, it finally wound up in the Aleutian Islands. And we were at, where were we? We were either at Iwo Jima, I think it was Iwo Jima, picking up servicemen. Could have been Army, could have been Navy, whatever. And we took on something like an extra 600 people.
Excuse me, just let's change tapes here.
Yeah.
You call each other riggers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of a, we associated with one another.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't for some reason or other, we didn't associate with other guys. Mm-hmm. But where was I?
Okay, you were picking up 600...
Oh yeah, and we were supposed to leave like day after tomorrow, let's say. Then the orders come out, we're leaving immediately because of the typhoon. And we only hit us the beginning of it, and nobody, here I am on an escort carrier. It's about 40 foot from the water up to the flight deck. Water was coming over the flight deck. Now I tell you, I never got seasick, but I think one of the reasons was the story got out, hey, in order to not to get seasick, get right amidships, because the ship is rolling.
Right.
Right amidships, it's almost stationary. But anyway, that was a real bad storm. And it lasted, because we got back to Oahu and stayed over there overnight, maybe a couple of days. And then we came back to the States. Then my ship went on to that magic carpet duty,
Okay.
took one more trip, and then that was demolished.
You weren't on the magic carpet trip?
I made one trip. That was the only trip I made when we brought that 600 or so guys back.
It must have been pretty tight quarters.
Tight, I guess so. It was tight. And there was card games going 24 hours a day. I wasn't much of a card player, so that didn't bother me much.
Too bad they didn't have a pool.
Yeah, I would like to have had a pool table. Yeah,
Did you cross the equator at all?
yes.
Did you become a shellback?
Yeah,
What was that like?
and I went over the international date line, of course, and that was exciting.
What did they do when you crossed the equator?
Oh, God, put you through all kinds of, oh, Lord. I got a card home that I've kept,
Right.
but they put you through all kinds of maneuvers, grease and, oh, good Lord.
Was it fun at the time or just a pain?
It was a pain, but you had to do it. You know, everybody else was in your same shoes.
Sure.
But we had on the way over, we had 2 meals a day. And it happened, I wish I would have I do have the name of that transport that took us over, but I can't tell you what the name of it is. We was in a hold. When I say we, I think there was 4 of us riggers from Jacksonville that did go to Oahu. One of them was Johnny Maros, was a very good friend, but anyway, we were 4, and a couple of these guys was from the Deep South. J.D. Nichols, he was from the Deep South. Blacks. They were all blacks. It was a transport of black guys. All Navy, but all black. And J.D. Nicholson, being a deep Southern, back then, that racial thing was very prevalent. And I used to have to say to him, because we would get out of the breakfast line and get back in line for the next chow, which was hours later. And J.D. Nicholson didn't want black guys ahead of him. And I used to grab a hold of him, hey, J.D., you got to stop this because you're going to get killed. And then we had boxing matches. They used to take like to put a white guy with a black guy, see him get beat up. But yeah, that was real tight quarters too, because the guy was right here
Really?
in your bunk. Yeah, stacked right up. Jeez.
Were you able to get letters from home and were you mail able to get
Yeah. I didn't get too many letters. I had before I left Shoemaker, I knew I didn't know where I was going. I knew I was going overseas. So I wrote my wife and I said, I wrote a list of places like Okinawa, Guam, some of those other, I can't remember, Inuitak, and I went through a whole list of names, and then opposite that I put a number. And I told my wife in the letter, I says, you'll know where I am because somewhere in the letter I will put the number, one of these numbers. So just look and then you'll know where I am. So when I used to write to her, I would put a number in. So I guess she knew roughly where I was.
Now what was she doing?
She went to work at the same time I did at the air base.
Okay.
Back then, there was no Air Force.
Right.
It was the Rome Army Air Force. Army Air Force. My wife worked first as a stock tracer. She stayed there till I got discharged. And then after I went in the service, she got a little bit better job. She worked for a bomb site. And this was a very secure, underground, the bomb site building was underground. and she had to have special clearance, and she had to get through several doors in order to get to work. She had a nice job. She made a lot of friends, and she talked about them for years.
Was it hard for her to work full-time and raise a couple of kids?
Yeah, yeah. But my kids, well, back then, I guess kids were different. Our society was different. She never had a problem. They never gave her a problem. And after I got on the service, until they became adults and got married, our son or our daughter never gave us a problem. Not one problem. And they both turned out very well. My son was an investigator for Treasury Department. And after he got out of the Marine Corps, he went back to college, got his college degree, and went into government service, Treasury agent. And then he transferred to Federal Law Enforcement Agency and went to Georgia. And my wife and I used to go visit him down there because he lived on St. Simon Island and had a beautiful home there, and it didn't cost us anything. We just went and stayed with their son.
Very nice. Now, so once you got discharged, you went back to...
I went right back to the air base first. I never took advantage of that 5250 club, which I should have done, but I went back to work, and then I got the bright idea of, and I got a hold of I put an ad in the paper, Rome Daily Sentinel, looking for a partner. I got the idea of why not buy some surplus and sell it. But I didn't have any money. So, but I had a good friend who, after I put the ad in the paper, I put in like, wanted a partner to buy and sell surplus. I didn't say anything about money. So who called me but a good friend of mine, Steve Snyder. And him and I got together. He furnished the money, and I furnished what we was going to buy. And it worked out very good. We went to several sales and sold the merchandise as fast as we could get it.
That's great. When you were in Troy, I'm going to bring up a name. I'm just wondering if you've heard. Mame Fay?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, that's a little incident I forgot. I knew Mame Fay personally.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did. And I knew her brother. I think his name was Tom Fay. But anyway, I'm out in the East China Sea, hanging over the fantail or the bow, wherever it was. And the sailor right next to me, we got talking, didn't know him, asked me where I was from. I says, Troy, New York. And he says, you know Mame Fay? I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I do know Mame Fay. And I did know her because when I worked for Gaynor, this is interesting. I took the job because I had seniority to deliver to all the girls on the line, which was right around the corner from our restaurant, to deliver them sandwiches and ice cream or beer, whatever they wanted, after 3 o'clock in the morning. I got good, the $14 a week job, I got triple that in tips. Not only that, but when those girls, it was like anybody else, if they would go out on a bingo or whatever, they would come to me, not all of them, but one, and some of them were nice looking girls, come to me and hand me their wallet and say, Carl, take care of this until I get back, otherwise I'll spend it. Okay, when they got back off their binge, give them back their wallet, there was always a good tip. They were good tippers. That was my experience. I know that Mame Fay was stopped one time. She used to go to the 5 and 10 cent stores and get her eye on a good-looking girl, well-shaped girl, try to talk her into being a prostitute. They stopped her. But yeah, I remember Name Faye.
Now, when did they close her down? Do you remember?
Probably they closed her down. I'm trying to think. It had to have been somewhere around 1945.
Okay.
It
Towards
had
the end
to
of
have
the
been
war.
around that era. Yeah. That was an exciting time, really.
Well, Troy must have been a much different place than it is now.
Oh, yeah. But you know, the strange thing is you can still go to Troy and see people walking around the street. Not like it used to be, but they're still walking around the street. Go to Mechanicville, nobody walks. You don't see anybody on the street.
Right.
Albany, you see a few people on the street.
So what do you think in general of your service experience?
My wife and I were heavy into genealogy, 40 years. So we know our whole line. And this often comes up, exactly what you're asking. And I tell this to friends and people and family, anybody that, when we get talking about it. If I had to do all over again, I would do the same thing that I done. That's how good my life has been. And I've had some bad times and good times. I wouldn't change much. My experience in my lifetime has been good. And I have a great, great grandson. Think about that one. I never knew a great grandfather. I only knew one grandfather, my mother's father. I never knew my father's father. He was a Civil War veteran. Went through the Civil War with a twin brother. And during my genealogy thing, years later, I discovered the twin brother had gone to Nebraska right after the Civil War, and I was in communication. In fact, my wife and I went to visit him, his son, who lived in North Platte, Nebraska.
Amazing.
So that's been the main thing in my life, is this family genealogy thing. And I'm still in correspondence with people in California, cousins, that they never knew I existed, in California, Texas, Oklahoma. They're all over. Michigan. So my experience, my life has been good, because I raised a couple of good children, and they've got children, and they're all the same.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, sir. It was a wonderful interview.
I enjoyed
Appreciate
it. I enjoyed it.